Alright, prep time seems to be over, and welcome to the semi-final of BP Novice 2015, and congratulations for all teams on making it thus far. The motion before the House is, in terms of economic crisis, this House believes that governments should withhold information that negatively affect the economy from the public. Without any further ado, I call upon the first speaker of the opening government. Here.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and ladies and gentlemen. So we think this debate is about which paradigm can better tackle economic crisis occurring in the nation. And we think on the side of the House that information has both positive aspect and negative aspect. And another status quo, because of the negative aspect of those information, people are unnecessarily influenced and this affects people's mindset in a negative way. So, in order to minimize those negative aspects of information and better tackling economic crisis, we are very happy to stand on the proposition side. So, today I have three things to talk about in my speech. Firstly, I'm going to tell you how those information is seriously disincentivize people's economic activity, and why this prevents the nation from recovering from the economic crisis occurring in the current situation. And second of all, I'm going to tell you how, after taking this proposal, we can better tackling economic crisis. And third of all, I'm going to tell you why it is legitimate for the government to withhold those information. But before that, several clarifications regarding this motion. So firstly, about the definition. So we say that information that negatively affect public means that information like GDP of the nation is decreasing, or business index is low, the status quo, or so forth. And secondly, we think economic crisis. No, thank you. Economic crisis means economic crisis is like collapse or bubble economy in Japan, or Lehman shock, or bankrupt of Greek, or so forth. And secondly, let me clarify our model. So we are very happy for the government to reveal that information that company was in hard situation when economic crisis is becoming better, and that can be we think that can be decided by the leader of the nation bank, or so forth. And lastly, let me clarify the burden proof of today's proposition side. So our burden proof is not to 100% solve economic crisis. So actually, the burden proof of today's proposition side is at least we can better tackle economic crisis by withholding those negative information. So moving on to okay.
Are you also going to withhold information such as stock prices or unemployment ratio, or all those information?
Yes. So moving on to the first point, how those information is seriously disincentivize people's economic activity, and why this is preventing the nation recovering from economic crisis. So when those information is revealed to public, how this is affecting people's mindset. Naturally, people will try to prepare for predicted hardship they are likely to face, and they try to save money. And as a result, this is disincentivizing people's economic activity. For example, in the individual level, people will refrain from purchasing luxury goods, or so forth. And also in for the company level, companies will refrain from investing in new projects, or so forth. So as a result, economic cycle becomes stagnated, and this can lead to vicious cycle, and this prevents nation from recovering from economic crisis. And this is especially true considering other factors that utilize those information like media or so forth. So once government reveal those information will be out of control of the government. For example, media sensationally broadcast such information, and this can lead to uneasiness of society. And media have big incentive to do so because such information can be attractive to viewers, and so media have big incentive to do so. So we say under status quo, social uneasiness is disproportionately created by the information coming from government and also media utilizing those information. So next, let me talk about how we can better tackle economic crisis after taking this proposal. So firstly, let me clarify what actor will be affected by taking this proposal. So we think that the target of today's motion will be people who can afford to do that, who are unnecessarily swayed by information under status quo. So after taking this proposal, those people will not unnecessarily swayed by wrongly perceived information coming from media or the government. So they can successfully consume their money based on their situation or based on their needs. So for example, those people can purchase luxury goods or so forth, or companies can invest in new projects or constructing building or so forth. And so we say that economy is deeply affected by demand, and after taking this proposal, there will no or at least less barrier which prevents demand occurring. So we think this is beneficial for tackling economic crisis. So lastly, let me talk about justification. So we think government can legitimately restrict revealing some information like secret treaty or military strategy or so forth, because those information is requiring technical knowledge, and it is too difficult for ordinary citizens. And also, as I said in the first point, those information can be perceived wrongly by the people, and as a result of that, those information can negatively affect people's lives. So, so this principle can be applied to this case, economic crisis. So we can say that government has obligation to restrict those information. From all these reasons, we are very happy to propose this motion.
I thank first speaker and I'd like to call upon the first speaker of opening opposition. Here.
Mr. Speaker, we of the opening opposition do not believe that those who actually use these kinds of information in the economic crisis are the ordinary people. But we of the opening opposition strongly believe that those who actually utilize the information in the economic crisis are private investors, like actual private investors or private banks and so forth, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah.
And in terms of these points, we on the opening opposition strongly oppose to this motion because actually this motion just perpetuates economic crisis, and we cannot tackle these kinds of economic crisis in a better way in the government side paradigm. That's why we strongly oppose to this motion. Today, I have mainly two arguments in my speech. Firstly, about why in this side of the house we can't tackle the economic crisis, and second of all, I want to talk about the reason why our side of the house can tackle these kinds of economic crisis in the better way. But before that, independent rebels. Firstly, the opening government sides talk about ordinary people who try to stop buying something in an economic crisis because of the information provided by the media and so forth, right? However, Mr. Speaker, in terms of these kinds of ordinary people, it is not totally mutually exclusive. Why is that? Because ordinary people change their mindset or change their action of buying something and so forth. It's not caused by the information provided by the media, but by the actual amount they gain, actual amount of income they gain, right? And in the economic crisis, actually, these kinds of ordinary people's income must be declining because of the economic crisis. So under that circumstance, Mr. Speaker, these kinds of action can be occurred in both of those paradigms. So that's why it is not totally mutually exclusive, and that's not the debatable point in this debate, Mr. Speaker. And secondly, and they talk about the people who are affected by this motion is that those who can afford to buy something and so forth, right? And in terms of these kinds of people, Mr. Speaker, these kinds of people must buy something at any circumstances, even in economic crisis and so forth, Mr. Speaker. We cannot distinguish what is the difference between the ordinary cases or ordinary economic situations and the economic crisis in terms of action of these kinds of affordable persons. They never explain the difference of these situations. So that's why their point doesn't stand. Then let me move on to our first point. Why in this Asia side of the house we cannot tackle the economic crisis in a better way? So in the government side paradigm, Mr. Speaker, the case in which the investors invest in war companies which will be increased. What war cases it mean? So it means that in the government side paradigms, Mr. Speaker, investors might invest the company which just asked them to do so, Mr. Speaker. Why not so? There are two reasons. Firstly, according to this model, Mr. Speaker, no one can actually know precisely about which company's economy is going down and which company is still fighting against the economic crisis and so forth, because all kinds of information about economic crisis will be hidden by the government, right? For example, the declining of the benefit of some companies, or the decrease of the job rate, or the decrease of the GDP, and so forth, Mr. Speaker. Because all kinds of this information will be hidden in the government side paradigm, Mr. Speaker. Investors cannot know which company they should invest in order to tackle the economic crisis in a better way. And second of all, Mr. Speaker, and also Mr. Speaker, even if some companies which might be affected directly by the economic crisis, they can deceive investors by using the narrative that actually we are affected by the economic crisis indirectly, so please invest some money to our company, and so forth, Mr. Speaker, right? And under that circumstance, Mr. Speaker, these companies can gain some money, but it is not the effective way in order to tackle the entire economic crisis, Mr. Speaker. And why is it so crucial? So because in the economic crisis, we have to allocate and distribute the limited resource, which means the money, to the most effective way, right? So under that circumstance, Mr. Speaker, if the investors are forced coercively invest to the war companies, that means that they just waste time and money and all kinds of costs, Mr. Speaker, right? So that's why it is so crucial, Mr. Speaker. So then let me move on to our second point, why our paradigm can achieve to tackle these kinds of economic crisis in a better way. So under the status quo, Mr. Speaker, we strongly believe that if a company cannot compete with the economic crisis, and as a result of that, go bankrupt, we strongly believe that that's okay. Why not so? Because under the status quo, Mr. Speaker, these corporations cannot actually cannot be perpetuated in that domestic economy, right? And we strongly believe that under the status quo, Mr. Speaker, the company who can actually be invested is for example, Mr. Speaker, they actually find out the root cause of the reason why their company's economy is going down and so forth. And also they by the investors, and that's why they can be invested by these kinds of investors under the status quo. And under that circumstance, Mr. Speaker, those companies who cannot invest it means that they cannot be trustable, right? So under that circumstance, Mr. Speaker, under the status quo, the investors can actually distinguish which company should be saved in the domestic economy in order to tackle the economic crisis in a better way, Mr. Speaker. So that's why our paradigm is better than the government side paradigm in order to tackle the economic crisis in a better way, Mr. Speaker. And also, Mr. Speaker, because of this existence of this kind of information, Mr. Speaker, investors actually can use the limited resource, the money, in the best way in order to distribute those kinds of money in the most effective way, Mr. Speaker, right? So under that circumstance, Mr. Speaker, our paradigm is superior to the opposition government side paradigms. So that's why we strongly oppose to this motion. Thank you.
Thank you for your speech, and I'd like to call upon second speaker of opening government. Here.
Of course, ladies and gentlemen, we are also considering the investors, but uniquely as a government who have an ownership on the information, who have an impact on entire society. So this opening position is mainly and only talking about investors, but we as a government have an impact on entire society, and uniquely in a time of the economic crisis. We believe that's not the time to reveal the negative information, and in that paradigm, we can minimize the negative aspect of revealing information. So that's why we are very happy to propose this motion. I, as a Deputy Prime Minister, would like to do two things. Firstly, let's compare both paradigms. Which paradigm is better tackling the economic crisis? And secondly, why this concealing information is justifiable as an economic policy. Let me explain to you one by one. So at the first point, what paradigm is better to tackling the economic crisis? So today's opening opposition, leader of the opposition explained to us, each individual can know the economic crisis by, for example, first-hand experiences of like income is downing, and also in a company, some people are fired. We do admit, and that's why, ladies and gentlemen, we take this motion. Because in a time, uniquely, in a times of economic crisis, individuals also get the information that now is the time the economic condition is bad. But in their paradigm, rather attackingly against that by government revealing like unemployment is bad and GDP is dramatically growing. So that kind of negative impact, negative information is hijacked and dominate in the individual's information. On the other hand, in that paradigm, of course, as they say, individual can first-hand experience, they feel the negative aspect, negative condition of the economy. But rather in that paradigm, it is easier for individual to focusing on, for example, positive information. For example, government more likely to try to doing public enterprises, and that is the economic policy, and also like the situation of the employment is becoming better. In their paradigm, that kind of positive information is hidden and undermined by that kind of dominant negative information. But in that paradigm, we can balance out and make them, enable them to focusing on the positive information. That is the rather important for the investors they try to protect, because in their paradigm, it is very hard for investors to take a challenge and courage to invest and spending their money, and also in the ordinary people's level to use money in a luxury, because dominant information is it is the not time to use money. But in that paradigm, because of this balancing out, individuals can do rather rational decisions and can our best allocation of their limited resources, ladies and gentlemen. So let's engage to the point. The main point is investors, they try try to protect investors, and they say like best allocation of welfare. But ladies and gentlemen, in order to enable them to utilize the usage of pies and welfare, the better paradigm is that welfare and that pie itself is greater and larger. That makes investors easier to invest and use their money. For example, in the paradigm, in a case of like Greece cases, in every day throughout the news, the like bank is going bankrupt and collapsing the company. That kind of negative information is every day repeated. And we as an individual, not all individuals are homo economics, and not individual can do an every time rational decision. Especially uniquely in the cases of the economic crisis, people have a tendency to sway and people are mentally fragile. So that kind of information can dominate and hijack their individual calculation. So that's how, ladies and gentlemen, this vicious cycle exists because that disincentivize individual to use money, and that decrease income and sources of revenue of the company, and that makes it harder to give wage and trickle down to the workers. So, ladies and gentlemen, that kind of aspect should not be justifiable. And also, ladies and gentlemen, if the investors uniquely about the uniqueness of the government, we believe if the investors, that company's information is so necessary and so particular people, of course they will research each company's condition. But what we are talking is about the stance of the government. Government, in the case of government, review information. For example, many bank will be collapsed in a moment, or that kind of information. That kind of propensity as a risk can be the real in the case of government review, because in the case of government review the information that is blanketly and have an impact with all society. So we believe in that paradigm it's hard to tackle the economic crisis. So but secondly, about the justification for the government, because ladies and gentlemen, what is the nature of the economy? The Adam Smith said the invisible hand will move motor the society. So essence of the economy is without the substance and without the entity, and rather like information have a dominant in a society. So that's why, for example, the Prime Minister Abe says like 3-arrow policy is great as an economic policy, and also like guarantee you this policy is a very great. That kind of saying, that kind of stance, that kind of information itself is an economic policy, ladies and gentlemen. That's why in the case that they do an economic policy, we do not like exaggeratedly saying that this policy is good, but at the same time, this is a risk of like corruption and superinflation of the society. As a government who is responsible and accountable to the economy of the entire society, government does not do that kind of like negatively biasing information. So ladies and gentlemen, uniquely in the economic crisis, as the opening opposition conceded, the negative information is still spreading. So this motion answers the question as whether or not additionally government are like proving and providing that negative information, or enable individual to focusing on a more positive aspect and room to get out of economic crisis. We should pray later. That's why we support this motion.
Thanks for your speech. I'd like to call upon the second speaker about the opposition. Here.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We concede that the pie of the economy should be bigger to distribute to the people so that the people can have better life. But this debate should be about where, in which side can actually maximize the pie of the economy in a way that it can develop the country's economy in a long way, right? We think that by taking this motion, it actually disrupts the rational calculus of investors to make proper decisions about where to invest in, where to use money for, that can actually long develop the country to sustain the country's economy. economy, right? So we think that's the core of this debate because the consumers like action cannot be really changed by this information. Maybe it can be a little bit, but we didn't. That's the fact that they didn't explain why consuming the marginal like amount of consuming on the other side is more important than investors' issue, right? So that as the Deputy Prime Minister, I'd like to talk about two things. Firstly, I would like to talk to you about why government should not restrict information, especially in times of economic crisis, considering the accountability of the government. Secondly, why in comparison, the free market is far better than the government to deal in terms of dealing with the information. But before the several parts of rebuttals, the first speaker has talked about, media can actually sensationally utilize this like information to let people not to consume things, right? Two responses. Firstly, we don't think it's really true that media reports, only one aspect of, the economy, right? So probably there are various types of media that criticize oil industry for them not investing in a good way, or like there are other media that reveals other kind of information, right? So we don't understand why one dominant narrative can be made under our paradigm. But secondly, even if that's the case, right? The economic crisis problem is distributed to the one issue. We think that's rather a good thing because we need the information to actually make a good investment. If we are able to know certain industries are declining, whether or not it can affect the economy in a bad way or good way, we can based on the information decide where to invest in and why we should not invest in that country, right? In that company, right? Secondly, then they have to go consumers who not invest in their not buy things. Two responses. Firstly, individuals themselves actually under our pattern can compare their past wage and the wage right now, right? And they basically see that the wage of themselves are declining compared to the past wage they get. So we think they're under their pattern, even under their pattern, that kind of information is enoughly spread, so they don't consume things under their pattern too. So that's the response. Getting into my issue, right? Why the government should not restrict the information, right? So we think that actually the government has the duty to ensure the infrastructure of information in order for people to truly decide what's best for themselves, right? So why is that so? Because we think actually, in the most basic part, government is made by the decisions of the people, right? People, based on that information that are spreading in the society, can do make decisions, that whether or not the government policy is doing good or not, and that kind of information. Because the people have the information to decide to judge government policies are good or not, or what company is succeeding or not, they can choose judge the government actions, right? So we think on the point because under their pattern, we are not sure what's the cause of economic crisis, right? Maybe that's because of the government's failure of policy to not to too much investing in such in one industry, or maybe how they utilize their budget onto the fiscal policy. But that kind of negative information about, for example, government failing, or for example, wine industry is declining, is going to be all hidden under their pattern, because that can negatively affect information, that can negatively affect the economy, right? So in this case, we think it's really illegitimate for the government to not take accountable to people, because without that kind of information, people cannot properly decide where to invest in, right? But before that, yes.
In our paradigm, individuals' criteria to use money is all wages and all capacity, but in their paradigm, government negative information disincentivize people to use their money. Why that is better to tackle economic crisis?
Okay, because then people are wasting money on industry that are not really growing, right? So but we think that's a waste of money, or actually detrimental in long term. But moving on to my issue, why people can efficiently invest, right? So what kind of information are we talking about? Let's be clear, right? We are talking about those information that government actually fails to deal with, to use money in an effective way to sustain their economy, or the tendency of one industry such as oil industry or production industry is actually declining. That kind of information are the one we are talking about, because because if such information is going to be released, yes, probably the consumer or the investors or also consumers cannot really invest in those like industry, right? So we think that actually leads to the bad cycle of the economy in the short term, probably. But we think that's actually in another paradigm, it's better for people to have this information. Why is that? Because people actually, when they perceive this information, they think about where they reconsider where we should invest in, right? Whether or not they should invest in some like oil like companies that are failing, obviously have some failure, structural failure in a corporation such as this is not like oil industry, but when the Lehman shock happens, people invested if they're under their part of that kind of information is going to be like hidden. So people keep investing probably Goldman Sachs or like that kind of company that are not like really successfully dealing things. Secondly, but we think government actually is like less capable to make this decision because government has a tendency to be collapsed by certain industries such as oil like company like lobbying to this like to government to actually keep investing in that company, right? Based on that kind of because governments are also people, not the perfect entity that can perceive the future of the economy. So they tend to like hide information that they want to hide, right? So we think that's actually detrimental in long term because people at the end of the day keep investing industry or companies that are like likely to fail, likely to not to be successful. But under our paradigm, we think because people can literally like calculate based on the information where to invest in, such as the service industry or IT industry, that are not likely to fail, that are not the cause of the economic recession, right? So under our paradigm, we think we can sustain the economy in long run. That's why we oppose.
I thank for your speech and moving to closing houses and like to call upon the first speaker of closing government. Here.
So the stance of the closing government is that we want to ensure that economic recovery is taking place in that paradigm. And we are also saying as an extension that